Hello and welcome to this tour of our exhibition, A Taste of One's Own Medicine, Medical Satire at the Royal College of Physicians. I'm Sarah Backhouse and I'm the exhibitions officer here at the RCP Museum. Our collection contains approximately 170 satirical images and caricatures, many of which have never been on display before. They've been collected over the 500 years of our history because they have links to medicine or to wider science. And they range in date from approximately the mid-18th century right up until the 1980s. And they also cover what is referred to as the golden age of satirical images generally. And they include some quite well-known artists, including George Cruikshank, Thomas Rowlandson, and Hogarth. We are used to seeing images in our daily lives, from internet memes to advertising. They saturate our society. And it was a bit like this in the 17th century. So printmaking and satirical images really emerged as an art form in about the 16th, 17th centuries. And in the 18th century, developments in printmaking meant that they could be more widely reproduced and more people could have access to see them. They would be in newspapers and magazines, but also in public spaces like shop windows, billiard rooms and brothels, for example. Satirical images are very often a response to things that are happening at the time. So they might be a commentary on politics, something happening, some social event, or on a particular person who is in the public eye. And because of this, it's often not easy to understand exactly what the image is describing, and therefore some further interpretation to give context to the image is needed. And that is what this exhibition is all about. Doctors and healthcare professionals have always been targets for satire because healthcare affects everybody and everybody can relate to the images. However, ultimately, artists needed their works to be able to sell, so people needed to know what they were looking at. And because of this, images of people often developed stereotypes, and doctors were no different. So the first theme in the exhibition looks at the stereotyped image of the doctor. The first print that I would like to show you is this one here, which is displayed in the exhibition alongside the book that it was published in. It shows a man who is dead or dying, surrounded by his family. A doctor is leaving the scene while a skeleton representing death taps him on the shoulder. The artist of this print, Thomas Rowlandson, presents the doctor as one of the most common stereotypes, which was as a disciple of death. The doctor has failed to save the dying man and so has assisted death in his work. And a popular idea at the time was that a visit from the doctor could be fatal, and doctors were viewed with fear as well as hope. Another enduring stereotype was that doctors were fatally ineffective. In this image, the doctor turns his back on his dying patient and sniffs his cane as protection against the disease that is killing him. Illness was believed to spread via foul odours or miasma, and so the doctor would sniff sweet-smelling herbs secreted in his cane to stave off disease. The cane is one of the most common attributes that doctors carry in satirical representations. So if you see a picture of a man holding a cane, chances are he is a doctor. In this case, the gesture of sniffing the herbs is futile, and we can see that death comes to claim the doctor after all. This print was published alongside a poem which includes the line, "'Tis fate commands, the patient dies. No call requires me now to stay. I've something else to do than pray. I feel my fee, then hold it fast," said grinning death, "for 'tis your last." Doctors were commonly criticised for being mainly motivated by money. In other words, they only treated patients to collect their fees. In this poem, the doctor's greed has backfired, and death is ensuring that he will no longer collect his fees. And this notion may well have entertained Rowlandson's audiences. So Rowlandson did lots of caricatures about the medical profession and medical themes, and he earned money illustrating books of physicians and quack doctors. He was regularly employed by Rudolf Ackermann, who published the Dance of Death book, and his audience would have been the educated, wealthy upper classes who would have been amused to see doctors portrayed like this. So the next theme is called Spitting Image, and our collection includes quite a lot of images of identifiable doctors. Now, doctors were often in the public eye, and because of this, they became targets for medical satire. These two images here are of the physician, Dr. Richard Quain. On the left is a caricature of Quain that appeared in the weekly magazine Vanity Fair in 1883. On the right is an oil painting, the last known work by the pre-Raphaelite artist John Millais, painted 13 years after the caricature. Quain worked at the Brompton Hospital for Diseases of the Chest and held senior positions at the RCP and other medical organisations, so he was very well known in London society, and in 1881 Queen Victoria asked him to care for Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli during his final days, and he later became the Queen's doctor. So he was very much in the public eye, and so therefore a very good target for caricature. So this is an unusual example of the caricature coming before the painting. Normally it's the other way around. And the two images are clearly linked. Quain has the same clothing and posture in each image. It's possible that a third image was the source for both these images, or more likely, Millet is directly referencing the Vanity Fair image, as he had connections to the magazine and would have been aware of the caricature. The change in Quain's facial expression from smiling to thoughtful could reflect the different uses of a formal portrait versus a light-hearted caricature. And it is a light-hearted caricature. It's gentle and not unkind. The image in Vanity Fair was accompanied by a biography which stated that Quain was, and I quote, "an amiable and agreeable man full of good stories." Being satirised in this way was actually considered an accolade and is a contrast to some of the other images we'll see later. The next image I'd like to show you in the spitting image theme is actually quite unsettling. This gruesome satirical image is critiquing the act of dissection, and more specifically the dissections carried out by the famous anatomist William Hunter. Hunter was well known in London society circles, and his appointment as the first lecturer of anatomy at the Royal Academy of Arts puts him in the public eye. The original artist of this scene, Thomas Rowlandson, was a student at the Royal Academy in 1772 when Hunter began teaching there. Hunter can be seen here at the top of this scene talking to his students. The scene takes place at Hunter's Anatomy School at Great Windmill Street in London, which was established in the 1760s. Note that Hunter is not the one getting his hands dirty in this picture. Instead, his assistants are the ones carrying out the acts of butchery, or rather the dissection of 3 corpses. And this was another later stereotype of doctors not wanting to get their hands dirty. It is a scene of butchery, performed by bewigged learned men wearing aprons and sleeves to protect their clothes. In the foreground, a body is being disemboweled and the entrails are discarded on the floor. It's a bit like an abattoir. The right-hand corpse has no eyes, but appears to be screaming in pain or horror. On the right-hand wall, a poster reads "Prices for Bodies," with categories for males, females and infants, suggesting that the image may also be commenting on the practice of body snatching. This was performed by so-called resurrectionists who were employed by anatomists to exhume the bodies of the recently dead. The bodies were bought by doctors to help them study anatomy, and this practice really strengthened the public's fear of disinterment and dissection. So this image really plays on the public's fear of dissection and on popular perceptions of the cruelty of anatomists. Post-mortem dissection, or anatomization, was greatly feared in the 18th and 19th centuries. Some people were afraid for religious reasons, and others were concerned that they might be pronounced dead incorrectly, and that the anatomist might cut into their still living body. The next theme in the exhibition is called Medicine as Metaphor, and it shows how, in some cases, medical imagery was used to talk about things that actually had very little to do with medicine. These prints actually use imagery of the medical profession as a metaphor to critique the tumultuous political events occurring in France in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's possible that medical imagery was chosen for the metaphor because it was so commonplace in the world of visual satire, and so audiences stood a better chance of interpreting the metaphor. However, it is still pretty obscure. In the left-hand print, titled 1760, 5 elderly doctors are using ear trumpets and walking canes and have very confused expressions and are wearing old-fashioned clothes. The suggestion here is that they are ineffective and outdated. In the right-hand print, titled 1823, are 5 younger, fashionably dressed doctors with carefully styled hair, a magnifying glass and thoughtful expressions, and the suggestion here is that they are engaged in academic study. These 2 groups of doctors are metaphors for the huge political changes that France experienced between 1760 and 1823. The older doctors represent France's Ancien Régime, which was the centuries-old government based on a hereditary and absolute monarchy and powerful nobility. The doctors and the Ancien Régime are chaotic and useless. The younger doctors, however, represent the French Revolution of 1789, which overthrew the Ancien regime and began decades of unrest as different regimes held power. These young doctors look more capable, but on closer inspection are perhaps not much more effective than the old doctors. They appear baffled and dreamy, and they are overly concerned with appearing stylish, which was one of the common stereotypes of a doctor. So we're not sure about the political views of the artist here, so it's up to us to decide if Boilly thinks that the political situation in France improved following the revolution, or that, despite initial appearances, things mostly stayed the same. The next theme in the exhibition is quackery and distrust of the medical profession. A common theme in medical satire was to equate the medical profession to quackery. And the term quackery or quack doctor is used to refer to somebody who is practicing medicine without the suitable license. The first image that I'd like to show you is this one here. This print is both a lampoon of the English doctor Edward Jenner and an accusation of quackery against what we now know to be a significant medical advancement, which was the development of a vaccine to prevent smallpox. Jenner developed a successful vaccine for the deadly smallpox virus using the milder disease of cowpox. The vaccine worked by taking tissue from the pox of a diseased cow and administering it to a healthy human. Here in the picture we can see Jenner working in a really crowded vaccine institution, administering a dose of vaccine pock hot from ye cow to a frightened woman. The idea of infecting people with an animal disease was naturally horrifying, and this image plays on the popular belief that Jenner's vaccine caused people to develop cow-like characteristics. Although Jenner was a qualified doctor and his vaccine contributed to the global eradication of a fatal disease, in the early 19th century it was alarming, distrusted, and likened to a quack remedy. This print shows that any doctor or treatment was susceptible to charges of quackery if it was in the slightest bit unusual or controversial. So the next image I'd like to show you on this theme is here. It's about metallic tractors and it's accompanied by the objects themselves. And it's an amusing look about how this quack treatment was used. Metallic tractors were a popular quack treatment promoted to cure everything from burns to epilepsy. They are 9-centimetre metal rods with a pointed end. In the print, the doctor applies them to the patient's red nose. As they are drawn across the skin, they supposedly discharged galvanic electricity, which is a kind of electrical life force thought to be present in all living things. This energy is directed into the affected part of the body and gives an instant painless cure. The electricity is shown in the print, knocking the patient's wig off and making the doctor's hair stand out horizontally. The patient's nose shoots flames as the illness is withdrawn. The artist James Gilray often used exaggerated facial features in his satirical works. Here the patient and doctor have over-the-top features and humorous postures, which are designed to ridicule the practice of tracturation and the popularity of this quack treatment. However, we know that this print was in fact a clever marketing ploy. The newspaper in the image refers to the tractor's inventor, the American doctor Elisha Perkins. It reads, and I quote, "Just arrived from America, Perkinism in all its glory, being a certain cure for all disorders." Perkins's son Benjamin supposedly commissioned Gilray to produce this print, requesting that their arrangement be kept secret and the print be sold widely. The ploy worked and Perkins' tractors sold for high prices, and he returned to America in 1810 after making his fortune. Many of our prints look at specific illnesses and the treatments that doctors used for them. In the 18th and 19th centuries, disease was prevalent. You could get ill by catching something from the water, from the air, or from vermin or parasites, so doctors really were fighting on all fronts. However, a common theme in the medical satire was how doctors were actually very ineffective to treat these illnesses and diseases. The first image I'd like to show you is this one. This is a brilliant example of how physical discomfort was portrayed in medical satire. It was a really common theme as it's something we all experience and can relate to. Here, the popular cartoonist George Cruikshank has vividly depicted someone suffering from a headache. While a man languishes in his chair, 6 devils torment him by hammering, boring and drilling into his skull and singing and trumpeting in his ears. One grinning devil teases him with a red-hot poker. The image is making fun of the man's attempts to treat himself, and you can see the empty medicine bottle in his hand and the pile of books on the table. The image is also a satirical commentary on modern medicine's limited ability to cure. In this case, medicine is totally ineffective against even the simplest and most commonplace of illnesses. So we don't know why artists created images like these, how they were received or consumed. Humour may have been used to reduce people's fear of sickness and death and of the treatments themselves. Light-hearted representations of common illnesses may also have appealed to healthy audiences who could view them with amusement and relief. In the case of this image, the viewer can really empathise with the patient who is overwhelmed by his headache's ability to incapacitate. The viewer can also be amused by the patient's exaggerated expression and perhaps relieved that they are not suffering in the same way themselves. The other image that I'd like to show you in this theme is this large one here on the wall. It's called Taking Physic and includes 4 small images. This image shows 3 of the most common treatments that doctors prescribed in the 18th and 19th centuries. In each image, the same man appears and they tell the story of his recovery from overindulgence. The first image, called Taking Physic, shows the effects of taking laxatives to purge the body of poisons. The patient is taking a bitter medicine that has been concocted from the bottles in his hand and on the mantelpiece. Laxatives were taken repeatedly, and you can see that the patient has just used the chamber pot as his shirt is untucked and his trousers are undone, but presumably he will be returning there soon. In the next image, Gentle Emetic, the patient's doctor has mixed senna or tartar into his tea to make him vomit, and the word gentle is used tongue-in-cheek here, as there is nothing gentle about purging. You can see that he looks queasy, his hands move unconsciously to his stomach and to grip his knee, and his right foot flexes as a wave of nausea, and there is a bowl ready for him on the table. Breathing a vein here refers to bloodletting, which was a brutal procedure. The patient is horrified and can't even watch as blood gushes from a punctured artery in his forearm, and the doctor stands poised with a bowl to catch it. Patients were often bled like this until they fainted, and the procedure was repeated if the patient did not improve. In the final image, the patient has been restored to full health as a result of, or perhaps despite of, the treatments that he has endured. He smiles and lifts a celebratory glass before a meal of roast bird and eggs, and we are left to wonder how long this overindulgence can continue before he will be required to repeat the horrible treatments that he has just gone through. And this image shows us how a lot of treatments were very invasive and even violent. Doctors wielded sharp lancets, prescribed disgusting purges, and invaded bodily cavities, and the treatment was often as agonising as the illness, and satire really enjoyed exaggerating this. This theme is called A Time and a Place, and it looks at the images in our collection which are related to medicine and to wider science themes. Now, satire is very much rooted in the context in which it was made, so it might be referring to specific historical events or talking about specific people. Because of this, we need to provide interpretation to explain what on earth is going on in the picture, and this is what this case tries to do. So the very first image I'd like to show you is this very striking one here, called The Kind of Assisted Emigrants We Cannot Afford to Admit. It shows a skeleton sitting on the bow of an English ship that is approaching Manhattan Island. The skeleton represents death in the form of the disease cholera. Specifically, this image is commenting upon how cholera was brought to the US by immigrants. In the background, bottle-shaped cannons fire disinfectant towards the ship, and the Board of Health tries to prevent it from entering the country. In the distance is Castle Garden, which is now called Castle Clinton, which was the US's immigrant processing centre between 1855 and 1890. So this image really plays upon the public's fear of disease, death and immigration. Cholera was an acute, often fatal illness caused by infection of the intestine from drinking contaminated water, which spread swiftly across Asia and Europe in the 19th century. It is believed that English immigrants brought the disease to the US in 1832, and over the next 30 years, the US had 3 serious waves of the disease, and New York was the first city to feel the impact. Immigration to the US increased rapidly in the 19th century, and emigrants were often assisted to leave by the government of their home country. Published in 1883, This image plays on general xenophobic ideas surrounding immigration. The figure of cholera wears Turkish clothing, perhaps showing fear of the Turkish Cypriot immigrants who came to the US following the 1878 Ottoman handover of Cyprus to Britain. And this anti-immigrant rhetoric is familiar to us today, as it is an enduring theme in modern politics. Another very confusing image in this theme is this one here. It appears to be commenting on late 19th century legislation concerning asylums and mental health in New York City. In the image, sane people are locked up and cranks are free to make outrageous claims and commit heinous acts. So we don't know which event or situation prompted the creation of this image, but some historical context can provide clues. The US had a rapidly growing population in the late 19th century, and there was a real need for better care for patients with mental illnesses. Part of this was a new law which stipulated that for a person to be confined to an institution for the insane, 2 doctors of reputable character must provide certificates declaring their insanity. In the central image, 2 prison guards are leading a man towards an open cell. One of the guards holds a piece of paper displaying the words "Certificate of Insanity," signed by Dr. Gag. The image could be satirising the new legislation requiring doctors to certify the state of a patient's mental health. Dr. Gag, on the other hand, could imply that the new laws are being used to silence people. The asylums are not filled with people with mental health conditions, but with political inmates, and the lawmakers are letting the lawlessness continue. The final theme in the exhibition looks how the Royal College of Physicians itself has been represented in medical satire over the centuries. As a 500-year-old institution, the Royal College of Physicians has been in the public eye for a very long time, and as you can imagine, this made the institution quite a popular target for medical satire. So this print here tells quite an embarrassing story from an episode in the history of the Royal College of Physicians. It tells the story of the ongoing battle between the licentiates and the fellows of the college. On 2 occasions in 1768, a small group of RCP members broke into the RCP's premises, then at Warwick Lane near St Paul's Cathedral, and they invaded the committee room and disrupted the elections of officers. The siege was essentially a battle between RCP fellows and licentiates following decades of antagonism. Only doctors who were educated at Oxford or Cambridge universities could become fellows, while doctors educated elsewhere could become a licentiate, which was a lower form of membership. Licentiates essentially paid higher fees, but were excluded from fully participating in RCP business and from voting in elections. So the print satirises both factions in the dispute. So the Scottish doctors in the print that you can see are the licentiates, and they are depicted as quite brutish, and their leader is wearing a jester's hat. The fellows are shown as quack doctors, and their leader, who is probably the RCP's president, as the skeleton Death. The licentiates forcing medication on the fellows can be interpreted as the RCP getting a taste of its own medicine. The ridicule directed at everyone involved after this event persuaded the licentiates to change tactics and protest through the law courts instead, and the fellows eventually made a series of concessions. The dispute about who could or could not be a member of the RCP and under what criteria was not fully settled until the Medical Act of 1858. So the very last print that I would like to tell you about on this tour is this one depicted here. And it's a much more light-hearted subject. So it's from the tales of Baron Munchausen, and it shows Baron Munchausen piloting a hot air balloon beneath which is suspended the Royal College of Physicians Anatomical Theatre, otherwise known as the Cutlerian Theatre. This print ridicules the supposed ineffectiveness of the RCP and its members. So in the story, the Baron cheerfully recalls lifting the RCP building from the earth by balloon during the members' annual dinner. And a quote from the story reads, "Though this was meant as an innocent frolic, it was productive of much mischief to several respectable characters amongst the clergy, undertakers, sextons and gravediggers. They were, it must be acknowledged, sufferers, for it is a well-known fact that during the 3 months of the college was suspended in the air, and the members therefore incapable of attending their patients, no deaths happened." So the Baron probably had bitter experiences of being a patient, because he implies that the health of London greatly improved during the time that the doctors were unable to treat their patients. This modern illustration was published in the Journal of the Royal College of Physicians of London in 1997, accompanying an article on the college suspended. This print is a much more fun and carefree type of medical satire and presents a very, very different contrast to the rest of the images that we've seen in this exhibition.